While I was burying my husband, my parents were calculating how much his death could pay them. But what shut them up wasn't me. It was my 9-year-old daughter and the bill she handed them. If you've ever been betrayed by family when you needed them most, stay with me. This story isn't just about grief. It's about boundaries, courage, and reclaiming what love really means. My name is Claire Dawson. I'm 34 years old, a mother, a widow, and a woman who has spent most of her life trying to do the right thing, even when it meant disappearing into the background. I'm also an architect by profession. I've spent years learning how to structure chaos, how to bring calm out of clutter. But nothing prepared me for the collapse that came on the Sunday morning my husband died. Michael was rinsing blueberries. It's strange what your brain holds on to when everything else is falling apart. The last moment before the rupture, he was humming, badly, as usual, jazz probably. Something upbeat and brassy. Ellie, our daughter, sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor drawing superheroes with pink hair and rainbow capes. I remember the scent of maple syrup heating in the microwave, the kind only Michael liked, the expensive kind, the real stuff. He looked up, smiled at me like he always did, when I caught him mid-song and said, "Don't let me forget to grab your dry cleaning today." Then he made a small sound, something between a cough and a sigh, and collapsed. No warning. No drama. No chance. I dropped the coffee filter in my hand and screamed his name. Ellie gasped. I ran to him, my brain scrambling to recall CPR steps, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely press down on his chest. I shouted for Ellie to call 911. She cried instead, frozen and small and shaking. The paramedics arrived quickly, but quickly wasn't enough. I watched them work on him for 17 minutes before they stopped. One of them looked at me and shook his head like he couldn't believe it either. Time of death. They said it kindly, like that would make it matter less. But it didn't. I rode back home in a blur. Ellie clutched my hand in the car, her knuckles white. She didn't ask many questions. Not yet. She just kept blinking like maybe if she looked hard enough he'd reappear. I knew I had to call someone. I needed someone. So I called the person I had always been told I could count on, my mother. She answered on the third ring. There was music in the background, bouncy, sugary party music. I heard laughter, glasses clinking, the unmistakable sound of a crowd preparing for something festive. "Claire," she sang out. "Oh my God, I was just thinking of you. Did you get the link? We're going live in 5 minutes. The balloons are loaded and Jenna is glowing." Glowing. I opened my mouth. No words came out at first. Finally I said, "Mom, Michael's dead." There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable silence that wasn't filled with shock or sorrow, but inconvenience. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice dropping just slightly. That's terrible. I'm so sorry." I waited. Then she continued barely a beat later. "But honey, today really isn't a good time to talk. Everyone's here. The videographer just arrived. Jenna's about to cut the cake. We hired a drone. Can you believe it? Pink or blue smoke. It's gonna be magical. Mom, Michael is dead," I repeated slower. "He had a heart attack this morning. He died in our kitchen." Another pause. Then softer, like she was trying to keep things from getting messy. "Can we talk about this later tonight? Claire, this is a big day for Jenna." And with that she hung up. I stared at my phone like it had turned into a foreign object, like maybe I'd misunderstood. But I hadn't. My husband was gone and my mother, had chosen a gender reveal party over grief. I looked up and saw Ellie standing in the hallway, her penguin slippers poking out from beneath the hem of Michael's flannel. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "Did Grandma say she's coming?" she asked. I shook my head slowly. "Not yet, baby." We sat on the kitchen floor that night, the lights off, the air cold. Michael's coffee mug still sat on the counter, full and forgotten. His keys were in the dish by the door. His jacket hung on the chair where he always left it, even though I always asked him not to. Ellie eventually fell asleep, curled up next to me, her head on my lap. I didn't move. Outside, the world kept spinning. Jenna probably posted the photos already. Her glowing under a sky of pink or blue, surrounded by people clapping and smiling, unaware or unconcerned that 3 hours earlier my life had shattered. I used to think the people you needed would show up when it counted, that when tragedy struck, the doors that mattered would open. But that night, as I held my daughter in a house that no longer had Michael's warmth, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. Some doors don't open, not because they can't, but because the people behind them never intended to let you in. Grief. I've learned doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in like water through cracks, slow and unrelenting, until one day you realize the floor beneath you is warped and nothing sits right anymore. The house was quiet in the days after Michael died, not peaceful, just hollow, like a theater after closing. I moved through the rooms mechanically picking up socks he'd kicked off 2 nights before opening drawers he'd last used. I found his watch still ticking in the bathroom cabinet. I didn't stop it. I couldn't. But it wasn't just the emptiness of his absence that hurt. It was the vivid presence of everything we had built together. Every object was a breadcrumb back to the life we'd made, one that now only lived in me. I met Michael during my junior year at Oregon State. He was a graduate assistant in a class I nearly failed. Environmental systems of all things. I was overwhelmed, exhausted, and carrying the quiet panic of someone afraid she'd chosen the wrong major. He noticed. He stayed after class one afternoon to help me rework an assignment and ended up staying until the janitor flicked the hallway lights off. He had a laugh that made you want to lean in, eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He wasn't loud or flashy, just present in a way few people are. Calm and clear and absolutely himself. We were opposites in a lot of ways. He was methodical, deliberate. I was the kind of person who drew concept sketches on napkins and forgot to label them. But he made me feel steady, like maybe I didn't have to outrun everything to be worth something. We married 2 weeks after graduation in my grandmother's backyard, under a rented arch wrapped in eucalyptus. My mother had complained about the modesty of it. No ballroom, no orchestra. But we were happy. Wildly so. We spent the first few years scrambling. Graduate school for him, internships for me, ramen noodles and broken IKEA furniture, and late nights working side by side at our shared desk. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. When we decided to try for a baby, we assumed it would happen quickly. We were young, healthy, and wildly optimistic. What followed was 3 years of waiting, disappointment, and longing that wrapped itself tight around our marriage like ivy. I miscarried twice. Each loss made the walls of our tiny apartment feel closer, the silence heavier. We tried IVF once. The drugs wrecked my body. I hated how hope became a thing we injected at 7 a.m., how even our dreams felt medicalized. After it failed, I told Michael maybe we should stop trying, that maybe we weren't meant to be parents. He didn't argue. He just held me and said, "Whatever life we get to build, I'm grateful it's with you." 2 months later, I was pregnant. Naturally. Unexpectedly. I was terrified. The pregnancy was hard. I was on partial bed rest by month 5. Michael took a temporary leave from work and turned our apartment into a nest. Pillows fluffed just right, crackers and ginger tea on every surface. He read baby books out loud at night, made up songs for our unborn daughter, and massaged my swollen ankles without being asked. When Ellie was born, Michael sobbed. I remember watching him cradle her, this tiny pink creature who had screamed her way into the world, and thinking, this is the best thing I've ever done. He became a father in the truest, deepest sense. He coached Ellie's soccer team even though he didn't know the rules. He learned them by watching YouTube at night while folding laundry. He braided her hair for picture day, packed her lunch with sticky notes that said things like, "You are bold and brave and hilarious." He showed up for everything: parent-teacher nights, dentist appointments, the school play where Ellie played Tree 3. More than that, he showed up emotionally. He listened. He looked her in the eye. He taught her to apologize when she hurt someone and to stand up for herself when she needed to. He told her every day that she was loved, not for what she did, but for who she was. I used to lie in bed at night watching them laugh in the kitchen and think, this is more than I deserve. Now I lie in that same bed and wonder if I'll ever feel that way again. Michael wasn't perfect. He left cabinet doors open, forgot garbage day at least twice a month, and hated cilantro with a passion that made ordering tacos an ordeal. But he made me feel like the version of myself I wanted to be. Not perfect, just seen. People talk about losing a spouse like it's a single event. One moment, one goodbye. But the truth is, it's 1,000 tiny deaths. Every time I reach for the remote and remember he queued up our shows. Every time I hear jazz and my breath catches. Every time Ellie says Dad used to, and I have to steady myself to listen. Michael wasn't just my husband. He was the shape of the life I'd built. The warm weight in the passenger seat. The hand on my lower back when I hesitated. The voice that said, "You've got this," when I doubted. Losing him wasn't just losing a person. It was losing the best parts of the life I believed in. And now I'm left to figure out how to live inside a blueprint we designed for two. In the first 48 hours after Michael's death, I lost track of time. Days blurred into one another, broken only by the needs of my daughter and the logistics of grief, funeral homes, death certificates, what to do with his suits. I kept waiting for the phone to ring. After that first call, after my mother hung up to watch pink smoke billow across a manicured lawn, I told myself she'd call back. That when the guests left and the cake was eaten, and Jenna had posted her perfect balloon boom moment, she'd realize something monumental had shifted and call me in tears. She didn't. So I called her. It was late Monday afternoon. Ellie had finally drifted into an exhausted nap on the couch, still in the same leggings she'd worn when the world broke. I stepped into the hallway, phone pressed to my ear like a lifeline. This time she answered on the second ring. "Claire," she said, like she'd been expecting me. Her voice was oddly bright. "I meant to call you last night. We were just so swamped. Jenna had friends from college flying in, and your father's sciatica flared up during cleanup. I cut in more desperate than angry. I need help. I need you to come. Ellie's asking for you. She's not sleeping. She won't eat. I don't know how to do this." There was a pause, then the telltale background noise, chatter music, laughter. They were still hosting, still entertaining. "Oh, honey," she said gently. "I wish we could. Really. But we still have guests. Some of them stayed the night and, well, Jenna's emotional. It was a lot for her, too. I promise we'll come by later this week once things settle." I almost dropped the phone. "She lost her father," I whispered, barely able to push the words out. "Your granddaughter lost her dad. I'm not asking for a casserole. I'm asking you to show up." Another pause. "Claire, I understand. But it's been such a high-pressure weekend, and we don't want to bring heavy energy into Jenna's postpartum space." "She's not even postpartum yet," I snapped. "She's having a baby shower. I had a funeral." That was the moment I felt something snap. Not loud, not violent, just a quiet, clean break. Like a hairline fracture finally giving way under weight it had been holding for too long. When we ended the call, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went back into the living room and sat beside Ellie, who was still clutching one of Michael's t-shirts like it might dissolve if she let go. It was my neighbor Elise who knocked first. She came with a covered dish and eyes that didn't flinch when I answered the door, looking like I hadn't slept in 2 days. She didn't say, "Let me know if you need anything." She said, "I'll be back tomorrow to walk Ellie to school if she's ready. And do you want me to help make the list of who to notify?" Then came Tom from Michael's firm carrying 2 grocery bags and a folder of insurance contacts. Jennifer, my coworker, dropped off a basket with tea protein bars and a handwritten note that simply read, "When I lost my mom, I forgot how to eat. Please try." Even the UPS guy paused long enough to say, "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am," before handing me a package I didn't remember ordering. These people weren't family. But they showed up like they were. On Tuesday, I got a text from Michael's younger brother, Ryan. "Just heard. I'm flying out tonight. We'll be there tomorrow. Whatever you need." Ryan taught English at a university in Tokyo. He hadn't been back to the States in almost 2 years. But he didn't ask questions. He didn't wait for an invitation. He booked a flight, boarded a plane, and arrived at my front door with jet lag in his eyes and grief clenched in his jaw. Ellie threw herself into his arms. He didn't let go. He helped me organize documents sorted through Michael's files when I couldn't bring myself to open his desk drawer and fix the faucet that had been leaking for 3 weeks. He made pancakes with Ellie and let her pretend she was guest starring on his cooking show. He stayed up late with me drinking tea and telling stories about Michael from when they were kids. Some I'd never heard, some he barely remembered until now. And he didn't once ask how I was doing in that superficial way that people use when they hope you'll say fine. He asked like he meant it, and he stayed for the answer. It was sometime late that night, sitting across from Ryan in our dim kitchen, that the realization sank in. Not like a thought, but a truth that had been waiting for me. I'd always been invisible in my family. Not overtly. Not in a soap opera slamming door kind of way. Just not chosen. Not seen. Not the center of anything. I was the reliable one, the calm one, the self-sufficient older daughter who didn't ask for much and was praised for her strength. Jenna was the celebrated one, the glowing one, the baby with the milestones and the spotlight. And I had learned slowly and silently how to shrink around that. It wasn't until now, when I was breaking in plain sight and still expected to wait my turn, that I saw how deeply that pattern ran. They weren't coming. Not now. Not later this week. Maybe not ever in the way I needed them to, and for the first time I wasn't sure I wanted them to. The morning of Michael's funeral arrived too brightly. It was the kind of crisp, clear day he would have loved, sunlight catching on the edges of frosted leaves, the air sharp and clean. I resented it. The sky should have mourned. It should have matched the way my lungs felt when I tried to breathe. I woke early, long before Ellie stirred. I moved through the house like a ghost, laying out her dress, brushing the sleeves of Michael's favorite blazer, folding tissues into my purse, though I knew they wouldn't be enough. Ellie chose a blue dress with little embroidered stars. Dad said I looked like a galaxy in this one, she said softly as I zipped it up. I tied a small braid along her temple the way Michael had learned to do from YouTube videos, the way he did on school picture days and birthdays. She squeezed my hand when I finished. "You did it right," she said. We arrived at the funeral home early. I wanted time to greet people, to be composed, to feel in control of something, anything. Michael's colleagues arrived first. Not just coworkers, but real friends. People who had sat across from him in meetings, laughed at his dumb jokes, trusted his financial advice, shared office pizza with him after hours. They came in suits and somber eyes. Many brought their spouses. Some brought casseroles. One woman brought a framed photo of Michael from a company retreat, his arm around her husband, smiling wide and full of life. They cried. They told stories. They made Ellie laugh even for a moment. They showed up. My parents and Jenna were supposed to be there early too. I had saved seats for them in the front row. They arrived 20 minutes late. The chapel doors creaked open mid-service as people were settling into the hush of grief. Heads turned. There they were. My mother in towering heels that wobbled on the carpet, clutching her phone like a weapon. My father looking vaguely annoyed, tugging at his too-tight collar. Jenna in a tight pink dress with glitter thread and open-toed shoes. She looked like she was headed to a spring luncheon, not a funeral. They found their seats, noisily exchanging awkward smiles and nods like guests arriving late to a movie. My mother leaned over to kiss my cheek, her perfume cloying saccharine. "The traffic was awful," she whispered. "And Jenna had the hardest time finding something appropriate to wear. You know how she is with black." I didn't respond. I couldn't. During the eulogy, I saw Jenna checking her phone, scrolling absently. My father kept glancing at his watch. My mother dabbed her eyes occasionally, though I never saw a tear. In contrast, Michael's brother Ryan sat beside Ellie, holding her hand the entire time. His eyes never left the front of the chapel. His face was carved from pain. He hadn't slept in days, but he showed up. Present, steady, real. After the final song, we returned to the house for the reception. Our living room filled quickly with neighbors, co-workers, distant friends from college. The kitchen counters overflowed with casseroles and condolence cards. People cried openly. They told stories I hadn't heard before. Little moments of Michael's kindness that made me smile and ache all at once. My parents. They sat on the couch like they were hosting a cocktail party. My mother accepted sympathy with a gracious nod, as if she were the grieving widow. My father stood near the drinks table and talked to my Uncle James in a low voice. I didn't mean to overhear, but I caught enough. Michael did well for himself, he was saying. Partner track. Life insurance alone must be substantial. Rachel and the girl will be set. Assuming she handles it wisely. It took everything in me not to confront him right there. But I didn't. I stayed with Ellie, helped her nibble on finger sandwiches. Listened as Ryan told her a story about the time Michael tried to build a treehouse and fell through the frame. She laughed sharp and sudden, then immediately covered her mouth like it was wrong to feel joy in that house now. Later, as the guests dwindled and the light shifted into early evening, Ellie crawled into my lap. "Mom," she asked. "Yes, love." "Why didn't Grandma and Grandpa hug me when Daddy died?" The question caught me off guard. I looked down at her earnest little face, her blue eyes so much like Michael's, and I felt something hot press behind my ribs. "I don't know," I said, which was true. "They didn't come that night. Not even after we told them." "I know." She leaned her head against my chest. Was it because of Jenna's party I didn't answer? I just held her tighter. That night, when the house was finally quiet and the last guests had gone, I stood in the hallway and looked around. The picture frames, the flower arrangements, the coat my mother left draped over a dining chair like she might come back to claim it. But I knew better. They had shown me who they were. Not in one grand betrayal, but in a series of tiny casual abandonments. 1,000 missed moments of empathy. 100 tiny dismissals that now formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. At Michael's funeral, I watched the masks slip, the performance of care without the substance, the illusion of support without the presence. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. 2 weeks after the funeral, the doorbell rang. I hadn't been expecting anyone. The house was finally quiet. Ellie was at school, her first full day back since Michael's death, and I had just settled at the kitchen table sorting through medical paperwork and trying to understand our new health insurance. Grief. I was learning had a long administrative tail. Through the peephole I saw them, my parents. My mother was adjusting her lipstick in a compact mirror, and my father was standing stiffly, straightening the collar of his golf shirt. I opened the door, not bothering to hide my surprise. "Claire," my mother said brightly, brushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. "We thought we'd check in. See how you and Ellie are doing." "She's at school," I replied. "Perfect," my father said, already making his way toward the living room. "Then we can talk openly." I should have known then, but I was tired. Tired in a way that no nap or bath or vacation could ever cure. Tired in my bones. Tired in my hope. So I made coffee because it was easier than arguing, and brought 2 mugs into the living room where they had already made themselves comfortable. My father was inspecting the new sound system Michael had installed a month before he died, running his hand along the sleek black speaker like it was a showroom model. "Nice setup," he said approvingly. Michael had good taste. He did, I said, setting down the cups. For a few minutes we danced around small talk. My mother's garden club, a neighbor's daughter getting married, something about Jenna redecorating her nursery even though the baby's not due for months. I nodded. I smiled. I waited. Then right on cue, my father cleared his throat. "Claire." He began setting his coffee on the coaster with deliberate care. "Your mother and I wanted to talk about your situation. My situation. Your financial situation." My mother clarified, exchanging a look with him. "Now that you're adjusting to life without Michael." I blinked, unsure what to say. "I'm managing," I offered cautiously. "Yes." "Well," my father said, leaning forward, "we were thinking, it might make sense given your current resources for you to help out the family. We're getting older, Claire. Healthcare isn't cheap. And, with the economy the way it is, you want money." I asked, my voice flat. "Not just for us," my mother added quickly. "For Jenna, too. She's still finding her footing. And with the baby coming..." How much I interrupted even though I didn't want to know. My father didn't hesitate. "We thought 50% of the insurance payout would be fair. That would secure our retirement and leave plenty for you and Ellie." I stared at him. "My husband died," I said quietly. "And you're here asking for his money." "You make it sound crass," he replied, frowning. "This is about family. About support. We helped you with your college tuition, the down payment on your first house. We've always been there for you. I laughed. Short, sharp, humorless. You weren't there 2 weeks ago when I called you sobbing. You weren't there when Ellie cried herself to sleep. You didn't come when I needed you, and now you're here with your hands out. Don't be dramatic, my mother said, shifting uncomfortably. Dramatic, I repeated. You think I'm being dramatic? This isn't a fight, my father said, adopting the tone he used whenever I challenged him as a child. It's practical. Financial planning. Family helping family. I stood up. This conversation is over. My mother reached for my arm. Claire. No, I snapped. You had your moment. You made your pitch. Now get out of my house. They left in a flurry of sighs and wounded expressions, muttering about how ungrateful I'd become, how they had only come to help. As soon as the door closed behind them, I collapsed into a chair and shook, not from sadness but rage. Cold, clean rage that burned like betrayal and left no room for tears. That night, as I tucked Ellie into bed, she looked at me with that piercing clarity only children have. Were Grandma and Grandpa here today? She asked. I hesitated. Yes. Did they bring anything? No. Did they ask about Daddy's money? She asked, her voice small. I blinked. What makes you say that? She looked down at her hands. I heard Grandpa say something at the funeral about us being set for life. My breath caught. Ellie nodded solemnly. I want to make something. What kind of something? She didn't answer. She just climbed out of bed and went to her little desk, pulling out construction paper and crayons. She worked quietly, brow furrowed in concentration, tongue poking out the side of her mouth the way Michael used to when he was focused. I let her be. The next morning, I found the paper on the kitchen counter. It was a handwritten invoice titled in big, neat letters, Bill for Real Love and Support. Below it, a list. Hugging me when I cried, $0. Not provided. Asking Mom if she's okay, $0 not provided. Coming to help when Daddy died, not provided. Being real grandparents. Priceless, not earned. At the bottom, a total 0 toned. I stood there for a long time staring at it, holding it like it was something sacred. Because it was the truest accounting anyone had offered since the day Michael died. And it hadn't come from a lawyer. It had come from my daughter. A week after my parents' unannounced visit and their thinly veiled financial ambush, I received an email from my mother with the subject line, Family Discussion, this Sunday. The body of the message was short-clipped and as emotionally distant as a corporate memo. We feel it's important to resolve this in person. Please join us at 2 p.m. Jenna and a few others will be there. It concerns all of us. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't say we love you. It didn't say how are you holding up. It didn't mention Michael or Ellie or the way they'd tried to turn his death into a negotiation. Just, it concerns all of us. I considered ignoring it, but I knew them. If I didn't go, they'd find another way. Calls, relatives, maybe even legal threats whispered through insurance, cousins, and distant uncles. Better to face it now. Ellie saw the email open on my laptop. She was sitting at the kitchen counter working on a drawing with colored pencils. Is that from Grandma? She asked, not looking up. Yes, I said. Are we going? I hesitated. Only if you want to. You don't have to. She looked up, her eyes calm, determined. I want to bring my invoice. I nodded. Okay. That Sunday we pulled into the driveway of my parents' suburban home. The one I grew up in, the one that felt less and less like mine with every passing year. Several cars were already parked out front. Jenna's SUV, Uncle James's Lexus, my Aunt Rita's little hatchback. They had brought an audience. I parked. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than I realized. You ready? I asked Ellie. She nodded, clutching a manila envelope to her chest like it was armor. Inside, the house looked just as I remembered, over-decorated, impersonal, like a catalog page trying to be home. My mother greeted us at the door with a forced smile and a tight hug. Claire, Ellie, thank you for coming. We followed her into the living room, where the rest of the family was already assembled. My father stood by the fireplace like a moderator. Jenna sat curled on the arm of a couch, scrolling her phone. My uncle and aunt looked vaguely uncomfortable. "Let's begin," my father said like he was opening a board meeting. He launched into his pitch. Something about shared legacy, how Michael had always said family mattered, how this financial moment was an opportunity for unity. My mother chimed in with her well-worn lines about helping Jenna get ahead and how they just wanted fairness and support for all branches of the family tree. Then he passed me a printed document with itemized percentages, 50% to them, 15% to Jenna, and the rest to be left for Ellie and me. I skimmed it once. My stomach turned. "I'm not doing this," I said. "Claire," my mother began. "We raised you. We helped." "No," I said, my voice sharper. "You didn't raise me to be a woman who'd hand over her child's future to people who only show up when there's money on the table." There was a murmur. Jenna finally looked up from her phone. "Why are you being so combative? Mom and Dad are just trying to be practical." Ellie stepped forward, then small but steady. "I have something to say," she announced. My mother looked startled. "Sweetheart, this is complicated. Maybe sit." "No," Ellie said, clear and firm. "This is important." She pulled the paper from her envelope and held it up for the room to see. "It's called a bill for real love and support," she said. "I made it because I think maybe you forgot what those things cost." Silence. She began to read, "Hugging me when Daddy died, $0. Not provided. Coming to help when Mom was sad, $0. Not provided. Asking how I'm doing, $0. Not provided. Being real grandparents, priceless, but not earned. Total $0,000. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't cry. She just folded the paper neatly when she finished and handed it to my father. No one spoke. My mother's eyes glistened, though whether from shame or self-pity I couldn't say. My father looked at the paper like it was written in a language he didn't understand. Jenna stared at Ellie like she was seeing her for the first time. "I think we're done here," I said, standing. "If you ever want to be part of our lives again, mine or Ellie's, you'll have to show up differently. Not with spreadsheets, not with demands, with love, with presence." I took Ellie's hand, and until then I added, looking each of them in the eye, "Don't contact us unless you're ready to change." And with that we left. No more explanations. No more space for bargaining. Just a mother and daughter walking away from people who thought grief was negotiable and who never realized that the smallest voice in the room had already spoken the deepest truth. For the first time since Michael died, I felt something shift. Not peace. Not yet. But clarity. After the confrontation at my parents' house, after Ellie's quiet but thunderous truth, something inside me clicked into place. I had spent most of my life swallowing discomfort to keep the peace, nodding along to avoid being called difficult, shrinking to fit the space I was allowed. But I wasn't doing that anymore. Ryan stayed. He extended his leave from the university in Tokyo and moved into our guest room without fanfare or expectation. He cooked breakfast in the mornings. Eggs shaped like stars for Ellie, black coffee for me. He walked her to school, helped with homework, taught her how to play chess on the patio. He didn't talk about grief much, but I could feel it in the way he lingered at Michael's old desk, the way he instinctively reached for the same brand of cereal, the same mug. His presence didn't erase the absence, but it made it more bearable. Together we began the slow work of stabilizing what had been shaken. Ryan was practical in a way that calmed me. He helped me organize our financial records, reviewed account statements, and made lists of questions for Thomas, our lawyer. He never overstepped, just offered structure like scaffolding around a damaged building. I didn't realize how much I'd been holding alone until someone offered to hold it with me. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I was digging through the filing cabinet in Michael's home office, looking for a misplaced password sheet, when I found a sealed envelope. It had my name on it. His handwriting. Rounded, confident, unmistakably his. My hands started shaking. I sat down on the floor and opened it carefully, the way you'd open a letter from the past that knows more than you do. "My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, something went wrong. I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to feel alone. I've done what I can to make sure you and Ellie will be okay. I've updated our accounts. The life insurance, the trust for Ellie, the will. It's all in order. I know you'll make the right decisions, but I need to warn you about something. Your father approached me last year, twice. He asked for investment help. It wasn't framed that way, but that's what it was. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to put you in the middle of it. I handled it quietly. But I had a feeling that if something ever happened to me, he'd come to you. Please, Claire, protect Ellie's future. Don't let guilt or obligation or being the good daughter compromise what we've built for her. You are strong, you are wise, and you are not alone. I love you. I'm proud of the life we made. Always, Michael. I sat there for a long time after I finished reading the letter pressed against my chest. I wasn't surprised, not really. But seeing it in writing, knowing Michael had seen it too, gave me a strange kind of strength. He had trusted me to do the hard thing. So I did. The next day I called Thomas, our lawyer. I need to make sure everything is airtight, I told him. The trust for Ellie, the insurance, the will, everything. Thomas didn't sound surprised. It already is. Michael was thorough. But we can add extra safeguards. Notifications for unauthorized inquiries, trustee restrictions, legal alerts. Do it, I said. And I want it all in writing. We spent the afternoon going over documents. Thomas explained what had already been done. Michael had set up a trust for Ellie that couldn't be accessed until she was 25, except for education and health expenses. He had made me sole executor, and the paperwork explicitly excluded my parents from any role or benefit. Still, I added layers. I authorized power of attorney clauses with restrictions, updated Ellie's guardianship preferences, and created a contingency plan in case my parents tried to contest anything. I wasn't leaving room for manipulation. Not anymore. Later that night, after Ellie was asleep and Ryan was loading the dishwasher, I told him about the letter. He sat down slowly, his face pale but calm. I'm not surprised, he said. Michael always looked out for both of you, even when no one else did. I nodded. He knew who my father was better than I did. Ryan hesitated. How are you feeling now? About all of it. I thought about that for a while. I'm angry, I said. But I'm also done apologizing for being angry. I'm done carrying the guilt of other people's choices. I can't fix who they are, but I can decide who gets to be part of Ellie's life. And mine. He smiled, tired but genuine. That sounds like Michael. And maybe it did. But it also sounded like me, finally. In the weeks following the confrontation at my parents' house, the silence was almost as loud as the shouting that had preceded it. At first, I expected another wave of pressure, a phone call, a surprise visit, something to reassert control. But what came instead was subtler, softer, and in its own way harder to navigate. The first letter arrived a week later in a white envelope with my mother's handwriting on the front. It was typed, addressed to Claire and Ellie, and full of vague sentiments about family misunderstandings and emotional stress during difficult times. It included veiled references to Jenna's pregnancy, to their own aging health, and ended with a line that read more like a demand than a plea. We hope you'll come to your senses soon. I didn't respond. The second letter came 3 days later. This one was handwritten. The tone had shifted. Less formal, more emotional. My mother had written pages about how they felt blindsided, how they didn't realize the depth of our pain, how they'd only ever tried to help. Still, the focus stayed on how much they had suffered, not on what they had done. Again, I stayed silent. But the third letter was different. It arrived in a plain envelope with no return address. The handwriting was messier, unguarded. There were fewer excuses, just sentences that felt real. We didn't listen. We didn't show up. And we're sorry. Not because you're angry, but because we hurt you. We know words aren't enough. But we'd like a chance to do better. It wasn't redemption, but it was the first time I felt something other than manipulation behind their words. When Ellie's 9th birthday approached, I asked her gently if she'd be open to seeing them, just briefly. She thought for a moment, then nodded. Only if we go to the ice cream shop, she said. The one Daddy liked. So we set the terms. I wrote back, 15 minutes, public place, no talk about money or the past unless Ellie brought it up. My parents agreed without complaint. We met at a small ice cream parlor tucked into the corner of a local strip mall. It smelled like waffle cones and childhood. Ellie wore the same dress she'd worn on the first day of third grade, the one with the sunflowers. She held my hand tightly as we walked in. My parents were already seated, dressed neatly subdued. No perfume, no rehearsed smiles, just people trying, I hope, to show up differently. "Hi, Ellie," my mother said softly. "You've gotten taller." "Only a little," Ellie replied. They didn't push. They didn't cry. They asked about school, about her new teacher, about the book she was reading. My father complimented her drawing, one she pulled from her bag shyly. My mother offered her a small gift, a hardcover book about the solar system, something Ellie was genuinely interested in. It was the first time in months I didn't feel like I had to brace myself around them. When our timer hit 15 minutes, I stood up. "We're going to go now." "Of course," my father said, rising. "Thank you for this." I nodded. "We'll see." That night, Ellie was quiet as she brushed her teeth. Then she looked at me in the mirror. "They weren't bad today." "No," I said. "They weren't." "Do you think Daddy would be okay with us seeing them again?" I thought of Michael's letter, of the trust he placed in me to protect our daughter. And I also thought of what he would have said. "People can grow, but it's your choice who earns your peace." "I think he'd want us to go slow," I said. "And only as long as it feels safe." Ellie nodded. "I think I'd be okay with slow." A few days later, an email landed in my inbox. From Jenna. It wasn't long. No flowery language, just 3 short paragraphs. "Claire, I was wrong. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened, what I said, what I didn't say, and what you and Ellie went through. I've been selfish. And I see that now. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly. And not because I want anything, but because you deserved better from me." She didn't mention her baby, or her party, or her problems. For the first time, her words weren't about her. I didn't respond right away. Forgiveness. I was learning wasn't a decision you made once. It was a road you walked step by uneven step, only as far as the other person was willing to walk it with you. I wasn't sure how far my family would go. I didn't know if we'd ever meet in the middle. But I knew this. I wasn't walking backward again. Michael would have turned 36 today. The day arrived like all anniversaries do. Quietly, deceptively ordinary. Birds chirped outside the window. Ellie asked for pancakes. The world kept moving. But inside, I could feel the hum of memory of love, not gone, but changed. It was the first year we chose to mark his birthday, not in grief, but in gratitude. I decided to host something simple, a gathering in our backyard the way Michael would have liked. No speeches, no candles, just music, food, people who loved him, people who had stayed. Ryan grilled salmon with lemon and dill. Michael's favorite. He wore one of his brother's old flannel shirts, sleeves rolled up, hands as steady as they'd been the day he landed at our door and never left. Kevin's parents, Diana and Robert, arrived early with a cooler full of homemade pies and a photo album I'd never seen. Michael as a gap-toothed kid on his first bike. Michael in college, making faces at the camera, Michael holding baby Ellie with awe in his eyes. Ellie flipped through the album, slowly tracing each picture with her fingertips. Jennifer came too, my colleague turned confidant, along with Tom from the financial firm who brought a bottle of wine and the same terrible dad jokes Michael used to love. Even Elise, my neighbor, dropped by with a bouquet of sunflowers and stayed long enough to play 2 rounds of charades. There were no toasts, no solemn moments, just stories, laughter, little waves of emotions surfacing and settling like gentle tide. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the lights over the patio flickered on, Ellie climbed onto the bench beside me with a plate of strawberries and chocolate chips. "You think Daddy would have liked this?" she asked. "I think he would have loved it," I said, brushing a curl from her cheek. She nodded thoughtfully, chewing in silence. "Then, do you think next year maybe we could invite Grandma and Grandpa if they're still being good?" I didn't answer right away. I looked around the yard. At Ryan tossing a frisbee with Robert at Diana, showing Jennifer a picture of Ellie on her first day of kindergarten, at the soft circle of warmth and care we'd managed to build out of everything that had fallen apart. I thought of all the things my parents had missed, all the times they'd chosen appearances over presents. But I also thought of the letter, the ice cream visit, the book they gave Ellie about constellations, the way they'd started listening more and speaking less. Maybe I said at last and smiled. Ellie didn't press. She leaned against me, head on my shoulder, content with the softness of a possible yes. And that was the difference. I used to believe family was an unchangeable fact, a list of names etched in stone, a script I had to read from even when the lines hurt my throat. But now I understood something else. Family could be chosen, re-chosen. It could be rebuilt, not in grand reconciliations or sweeping apologies, but in moments. In who shows up, in who stays, in who listens when it matters. Forgiveness wasn't a door you opened once and stepped through forever. It was a path, a winding one. And I had the right to pause, to rest, to turn around if I needed to. I didn't know if I'd ever fully reconcile with my parents or Jenna. I didn't know if they'd continue on this new course or drift back to old habits. But I knew that I could love them without letting them hurt me again. I could see their effort without handing them access to the most sacred parts of our lives. Michael had taught me to believe in the power of showing up, with kindness, with consistency, with humility. Ryan reminded me every day that grief and love could coexist. And Ellie, my fiercely perceptive, endlessly hopeful daughter, had taught me what boundaries looked like when drawn in crayon and conviction. Tonight, as we cleaned up the last of the dishes and carried inside the half-eaten pie, I felt something close to peace. Not the kind you wait for, the kind you build. No, I hadn't been given a neat resolution. There were still bruises that hadn't faded, words that couldn't be unsaid. But I wasn't waiting for anyone to fix it anymore. I had drawn the line, not in anger, but in love. And on this day, Michael's day, we celebrated not what we lost, but what we were learning to protect. Ourselves. Each other. A different kind of family.